I'm in this strange in-between stage right now, somewhere between coast fi and full fi. And I often feel pulled back and forth between spender and saver, future me and current me, speeding up and slowing down. It's a little exhausting, I have to admit. A few years ago, things felt simpler because I was in full accumulation mode. Most of my decisions came down to one thing: delay spending so I can save and invest more. Looking back, I maybe would have splurged a little on experiences or time-saving purchases, but honestly, I don't really regret that much. These days, though, I'm learning to focus more on my current self. I'm loosening up, spending a bit more, and not being so uptight with every dollar. Talking with my friends further along in their FI journey, I realized this shift is pretty natural, and perhaps you're experiencing it too. It's not always easy, though, which is why I wanted to talk it through with a friend and a frequent guest, Jesse Cramer. Jesse's navigating the same changes himself, and as a financial advisor, he also brings perspectives from helping his clients through similar situations. In this episode, we dive into the balance of spending on your current self while still enjoying the growth of your investments. We talk about how to loosen up around money habits like budgeting, and why we're not stressing about hitting our exact FIRE numbers anymore. I always enjoy my conversations with Jesse, and if any of this resonates with you, I think you're going to get a lot out of this one too. I hope you enjoy my conversation with the host of the Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors, Jesse Cramer. Jesse Cramer on the show. This is appearance number 6. You're making some distance between you and Sean Mullaney as the person that's been on the show the most frequent. And I think it's well-deserved because you are so good at breaking down complex personal finance topics into simple terms, which is why I continue to invite you on the show.
Oh, thank you, Justin. It's always nice to hear, and it's a lot of fun to do, and always fun to hear from your audience and to talk to your audience. So thank you again for having me back on.
I feel like it's super timely for me because I'm right in a place where I feel like I'm kind of moving away from this full-on accumulation mode and not quite in this like withdrawal phase, but definitely a period of slowing down and reprioritizing, which is where I want to start with you. Episode 94 of your podcast, Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors, you shared money-related topics that you've changed your mind about. One of them being that you no longer subscribe to this idea of paying yourself first, which is a popular concept in personal finance. Can you explain what you meant by that and what led to the shift?
Yeah, my thought there was that I still pay myself first a little bit, just not the way that it's always described. And so what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, like, yeah, technically speaking, before dollars enter my bank account, money's going into my 401k, right? Auto deducted as part of my paycheck. Because that is one of the first things you should do is get that employer match and make sure you're getting the employer match. So in some ways, okay, like that's one way that it still is a top priority and I am paying myself first there. But I think some other people, and I was at this point in one point in my financial life where I also made sure that I had an auto pay and auto withdrawal on to put $500 a month into my Roth IRA to make sure that at the time I could max it out at $6,000 per month. And that's actually something that I don't do anymore. Instead, I usually maybe once a quarter, really more realistically, it's like once a year towards the end of the year, I look at see how our cash balances have grown or potentially not grown over the course of a year. And then again, I haven't missed a Roth IRA contribution yet, but I wait till that point at the end of the year to say, yep, everything's fine. Our cash balance is good. I'm going to max out my Roth IRA here all in one fell swoop. And just the reason why is because my opinion over time has just slightly shifted towards from full-on saver to why don't you live a little bit? Just live a little bit. Why don't you focus on monthly cash flow? And yes, I don't want to outspend my salary on a monthly basis, but just in conversations with my wife and as we were talking offline, Justin, now I have a young daughter, and I'm starting to see, and I have been starting to see over a number of years, that it's nice to be able to build a little bit of flexibility into the monthly cash flow, still maintaining some eye on the prize for long term and making sure I'm saving. But it just means that I don't necessarily have to make these big investment decisions up front by paying myself first. And instead, I can wait till the end of the day, see how much extra cash I have left over, and then invest the difference at the end. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I'm still saving a pretty decent amount. It just makes me feel like I have more flexibility along the way.
I'm trying to subscribe to that a little bit more too. And especially whenever I started to realize like, oh, wow, my investments, how much I'm contributing to retirement accounts and taxable accounts is more than what I'm spending is a little bit of an issue.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think that advice is a blanket application to everybody. I think there are many people, especially in the early phases, that could be a great idea, that you could really put a lot of focus and emphasis on building your accounts, especially if you're young, because compounding interest is going to do so much for you down the road. But at some point in the journey, you got to start letting off the gas pedal a little bit and stop worrying about your future self so much and start worrying about your current self a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, something that again, going back to that struggle or that transition, because I was in the same place. Like if I go back 10 years ago, I was saving so much money and trying to do it up front, trying to pay myself first. And then I still remember times at the end of the month where I was like, man, maybe like you just alluded to, it's like I probably just saved 50% of my dollars this last quarter, but I'm feeling really stretched thin in terms of like there's not a lot of liquid cash left over in my bank account. I'm feeling this pressure like, oh, my friends wanted to go out and grab Five Guys, and I felt like I didn't have the free cash to do that. And it's like, well, if you're saving 50% of your income and you can't go join your friends for a $15 meal, then what's the point of all this? That's maybe like some of the approach. I will say though, because I could hear some devil's advocate, listeners right now saying like, oh, that's a pretty slippery slope to spending too much. And then at the end of the day, you don't have anything actually to save. So I will say maybe a stopgap or a guardrail that I've implemented is I don't budget upfront. Instead, I just review spending at the end of the month. And whenever we have a month where we actually have kind of outkicked our coverage and outspent our earnings, that's like a red flashing light. That's like, okay, we need to pause because we just earned X dollars and we spent 10% more than X last month. Our bank accounts, our cash on hand actually went down this past month. Let's make sure we understand why. Because if the reason why is this big project we've been saving up for, well, that's fine. But if the reason why is just like we were overzealous consumers for the past month, that's the thing we want to avoid. So there's still some guardrails in place that mean at the end of the year, I'm pretty confident I'm always going to have enough liquid cash to max out the Roth IRA, to throw some money into a taxable brokerage too. It's just a matter of the timing and whether you want to restrict yourself up front by saving too much, or if you want to give the flexibility to live a little bit of life and then save some on the back end.
I'd actually find that a win or success if, specifically for my audience, which is these people that are in their FI journey, maybe even coming up on the finish line, if on occasion they had a month where, whoops, they spent a little bit too much, because more times than not, we're on the reverse side where I think we're probably overdoing it on the saving side and underdoing it on the spending side. You're right. Like the Five Guys example that you said there, if you're not, rather than investing 50% of your income and instead you went out and bought Five Guys and you invested 49.8% of your income that month, like what's got to be the long-term difference if you've already built a pretty significant nest egg?
I mean, you know this term because I've heard you use it before, Justin. I really like it too. It's like the whole seasons of life, where it's like, okay, our spending will change throughout these different seasons of life. And these seasons of life, it's not like there's this stark contrast between like, oh, I was in this season and now I know I'm in this next season. And here's this really, clear line in the sand that divides them two. Sometimes it just kind of shifts over time. And for that reason too, it's like, I think building in some of that flexibility to allow yourself to change over time. Without it, you're going to end up in the situation where you're like, yeah, I'm still saving as much as I ever did. Now I just feel all this extra stress. Oh, maybe that extra stress is a signal that I'm in a different season of life now. Whereas if you do it the way that I'm advocating for, you might kind of avoid that stress because you'll have the money to spend as your life changes. And that's part of the goal.
Another interesting thing that I want to pick your brain about around this topic is how do you balance that shift from kind of moving away from paying yourself first or being a very heavy investor? Whenever you've mentioned something like you were on How to Money and you were talking about how you relate to Warren Buffett, seeing investing as a game and enjoying the feeling of watching his accounts grow, I'm guessing many people just kind of enjoy the thought, the idea, the practice of building wealth, even if they don't need any more.
It's a good question. And I suppose we have to take everything with a grain of salt in this world. And I know that some of your audience might be still in the early phases of their FI journey, and they really are trying to accrue. Maybe they're trying to hit Charlie Munger's famous, first 100,000. Yeah. Whereas other folks listening right now, like they've ostensibly won the game. Or maybe they're gliding in and just trying to figure out, do I retire at 47 or 48? It's like one of those questions. But especially for the latter group, because I'm somewhere in that messy middle myself, where because of all the saving that I did, and then independently, my wife was a good saver too, and because of all the saving that she did, to some extent, the dollars that I could contribute to my accounts right now are significantly less consequential than the dollars I contributed 10 years ago. And I try not to let that play too big of a role. I still want to save because ultimately I think about my timeline, and here I am, I'm 35 as we record this. So there's a lot of time in the future, and the dollars I save today are going to have a lot, decades and decades to grow before I spend them. But still, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, my accounts on their own, because of all the money I invested before, went up tens of thousands, if not more, tens of thousands of dollars in the last year, or many thousands of dollars last month. So it's like I probably could have written I could have contributed $500 to my Roth IRA last month. Would have been a smart thing to do, but just because I'll delay till the end of the year, I'll contribute the $7,000 maximum at the end of the year, and that's kind of a drop in the bucket compared to the growth that my overall portfolio has done, simply because of the market moving in the way it's been moving. So it's just, I mean, that part alone makes me feel like, okay, I don't feel terrible for all else being equal, right? We'd probably get money into the market sooner rather than later. Maybe if I'm going to make my $7,000 contribution into my Roth, I should do it on January 1 instead of December, or maybe even before next year's tax deadline. We did a good job saving to get here. And for anyone who's towards the end or even in the second half of their FIRE journey, I think that's a good thought to keep in mind, where that the dollars you've already saved are doing a lot of work for you. So you don't have to feel this urgent need to save more and more and more today. Like it can wait a few weeks, it can wait a few months, and you'll still be fine.
It's like hurting my head because the best practice in the first half of my FI journey was to invest the dollars on January 1st. You have the longest runway then to start having that IRA max start compounding and building. But now that I'm on the back half of the journey, it almost flips on itself. And it's like, why not wait to the last minute? You can still take advantage of that contribution year and the limit on that contribution year, but you give yourself more flexibility and liquidity, which might be a better characteristic of what you can be doing with your money right now. Because, an extra, let's even say April 15th, you wait till April 15th, the following tax year to invest that. And you got like a 15-month difference. Even if we have a monster year at 20% growth, like 20% growth on $7,000, whenever you take a step back and look at how would that impact my entire portfolio, we might be talking about fractions of a percentage. But that liquidity, having that extra $7,000 in your account over the next 15 months and you having a safety net there or an opportunity to deploy it to something else, probably better served, at least in the second half of your FI journey, which once again is why my head keeps rattling around, because I'm like, it depends who I'm talking to right now.
Right, exactly. And you raise a really good point. Like there's some sort of intrinsic value to having liquidity. It's hard to measure it in dollars and cents, right? Putting $7,000 into your Roth IRA and letting it grow, I can measure that value in dollars and cents. Having $7,000 just in case I need it in my bank account, I mean, what's that worth? It's hard to say. But the analogy is, it's like back in college, I don't know about you, but we had a lot of peanut butter and jelly in the dorm room. And it's like, guys, if we have 2 jars of peanut butter and 2 jars of jelly, what's that marginal jar of peanut butter or jelly worth? Like, I'm not sure how to make that decision. But if I have 100 jars of peanut butter and only 1 jar of jelly, my marginal grocery trip, I'm going to be buying jelly. I don't need any more peanut butter. I already got 100 bottles of it. There's something similar here. And, not to invoke the middle class trap or whatever it is, but there's that idea that a lot of us find ourselves in where we potentially have a ton of qualified dollars. We have a ton of simply long-term dollars already put away in our portfolio. Most of us, though, our bank account, our emergency fund, whatever we want to think about it, might only be a tiny percentage of that. I might have $1 million in IRAs and 401ks, and I might have 30 grand in the bank. Mm-hmm. So would I rather have that 30 grand stay 30 grand, or should I drop it down to 23 grand so that I can go turn my $1 million of qualified money into 1.007? You know what I mean? It's just like, It's that same idea. So that's why there's nothing wrong, especially in when you've reached that point. There's certainly nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I'm going to hold on to the liquidity for a little bit longer, and I'll make my contributions to some extent at the last minute.
Let's kind of transition into a little bit of financial planning talk, because I do think the conversation starts to transform a little bit when you're talking to people late in the FI game, or even have already won the game of financial independence. The growth of the future dollars is becoming less and less of a goal or a primary factor. And liquidity, peace of mind, conservatism starts to play. I would love for you to maybe steelman, strawman a situation. And let's say that, and this, I have a couple of FI friends are in this situation, and probably a couple of people that are listening, they've already won the game of financial independence. And let's just say like they won it big already. Like if their FI number is $2 million, they have $6 million. Like they're 3x their FI. They have no long-term plan of changing how they spend. Like they really enjoy their current life. What if I were to give them the advice of just pulling all of their money out of stock and moving it into something super conservative like Treasury inflation protected securities, like bonds, or maybe even cash? Like good idea, bad idea? What's your suggestion? Maybe somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. It's a really cool scenario you outline, and good for that person, good for these people for hitting that. And to some extent, we all kind of hope maybe we reach that day where we have just like money, just surplus capital, right? We have surplus capital in our portfolio. And the honest answer, and I think maybe the best answer I can get that applies to all people, is if you have that amount of surplus capital, you can truly do anything you want with it. To some extent, it's like there's not a mathematical answer. It's what makes you feel best. Like in this scenario, if all you need is $2 million and now you have $6 million, with that surplus $4 million, there's nothing wrong with saying, listen, I'm not going to touch this money potentially ever. If I do touch it, it won't be for many, many, many decades. So let's pour on the risk. I want to become an angel investor. I want to just go high octane. I'm going to invest in private investments, whatever it may be. I'm going to go around my community and look for businesses to invest in. And I'm looking for grand slams. And I know I'm going to strike out, but I'm also looking for some grand slams. Okay. If you strike out more than you anticipated, you're still going to be fine. So that's one approach. Another approach is just to say, you know what? This is this big safety net. I don't need to take any risk with this money. I've already won the game. And if you don't need to take any risk, there's some pretty good, I think William Bernstein has this really great quote out there that's basically, that says, when you've won the game, stop playing. So if you don't need to take any risk, why would you? Exactly. Invest in some U.S. treasuries. And someone could choose all 4 million of those surplus dollars, invest them in treasuries. They could probably just live off the interest forever. And then it just becomes an estate planning conversation of, now you know you're going to die with money. What do you want to do with it after you die? Okay, that's a fun conversation to have. And then maybe the final thing I'll say is there are a lot of investors out there who ascribe to some sort of like barbell approach. You know, if we think of an image of a barbell, we've got weight on one end, you've got the skinny nothing bar in the middle, and then you've got weight on the other end. So someone could just take my two answers I just gave and find some way to just do a 50-50 split and just say, I like the idea of taking some risk. And so I'm going to do something really, really, really risky with $1 million or $2 million of this. But then at the same time, I want to have some safety net, and I like that quote about quitting the game once you've won. So with the other $2 million, I'm going to put it in treasuries and just rest on my laurels. There's no right or wrong answer there. I truly think it comes down to the individual investor or family.
I love that. In your most recent AMA, you were talking about your approach, or really the goals of anyone's portfolio should accomplish two things. One, grow enough during a bull market to meet the investor's long-term goals. And number two, be stable enough during a bear market so that they don't totally freak out. And if you kind of like extrapolate that concept a little bit to your own portfolio, like kind of do both of that. And once you've already met your long-term investing goals, it might be a time where you start indexing for stability and or go have fun. Like kind of back to where we started this conversation, like start spending a little bit more, take some chances, do the other things that you really want to do that would maybe light you up.
Yeah. I mean, it is the way you just explained it there, Justin, it almost is like this exercise where if you stumbled onto a $10 million lottery ticket tomorrow, it's interesting. You know, we don't have to go through the exercise because we think it might happen because we know the odds are low. But it's worth going through the exercise almost just to understand how you think about money and like whether it's your risk tolerance or just the way that you react, because it's worth understanding the three major categories I could think of when someone stumbles into that is either how they want to spend some of it today. Do they want to give some of it away today? Do they want to do something nice for their friends or family today? Do they want to do something nice for themselves and just splurge today? So like that's one aspect of it. But then the other two aspects are, how much of that $10 million do you want to just play it safe and put away for a rainy day versus how much of that do you want to potentially have it grow for the future? Are you looking at growth or stability? Those are the three major categories I think of. It's just a fun little exercise to inform yourself or maybe learn from your spouse or with other people in your life, just to learn how they would approach that problem.
I've really been pushing myself to experiment a little bit more in this. I've been conservative and kind of an aggressive saver and investor over the last decade. And now this year, I'm not even taking chances, but not overthinking a lot, especially spending choices. It's something that I'm like, you know what? The dealership was calling me the other day. I needed to get a couple of things fixed on my car. Previous me would have been like, let me think about that. Let me quote some other places. Current me was like, Justin, just pull the trigger, get it done. The anxiety's gone. You got it fixed. The car comes back. We're all done and said. And I've been doing that with a lot of different things recently. And I'm guessing at the end of the year, I'm going to come back a little bit further on that pendulum and be like, you know what? I do actually kind of like diving into my car issues and trying to fix them myself and maybe quoting out a few other things. But specifically for this year of my life, I'm trying to almost push myself on the other end where I'm like, you know what? If you optimize for convenience and for spending and all the other things, like what does that feel like to you? Because I haven't felt that really at all over the last decade or so. And it's been interesting already, and some feedback has already came back to me of like what I've spent money on that I'm like, I don't really want to do that again. That wasn't exactly what I thought. And then other things I'm like, that was really cool. Like I bought an ad for my podcast and I was like, you know what? That meant a lot to me. And I'm glad that I like investing in something that I really care about. So it's been cool where some things are meaningful to me and other places where I'm like, I checked that box. It did exactly what I thought it was going to do. And I'm okay never doing that again.
Yeah. And our fellow content creator, although maybe he's a couple rungs ahead of us on the ladder, Nick Majuli, he's making the rounds as we record this because he recently wrote a book. And one of the interesting topics of his book is, it's kind of like this levels of the game or rungs on the wealth ladder, as he would call it. And I forget the specific examples, but he kind of talks about, once you've attained this level of wealth or that level of wealth or the one above it, you can stop being so concerned about certain decisions. At a certain level of wealth, it's like, who cares whether your grocery bill is 60 or 80 or $100?
Yeah.
But then at the next level of wealth, it's like, who cares whether your flight is 400 or 600 or $800, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I've certainly seen that too, because it's like, eventually you come to the point where you just say, the organic brand is a couple dollars more. I'm going to get it because I don't need to kind of feel any sort of stress or tension over $2 decisions anymore. And anyway, there's something nice in that too, where I think, obviously a really important pillar of the FI movement is frugalism and minimalism to some extent. It's like really being aware of what you spend and how much you spend and trying not to spend your money in some sort of like loose or unthoughtful way. But at the same time, I think there's a cost benefit that we all have to do. And it's like, listen, if you're stressing over $2 decisions and you're this person who's got $6 million, even though you only need $2 to retire, when are you going to let go?
It's got to feel very weird if someone's listening and kind of following along with my catalog right now. We just had 2 episodes, one about reducing your food waste and one about not buying new things. And I'm hoping the messaging that they got, at least from me, although many people, the messaging will be like, this is a great way to save money, especially if you're in the accumulation stage. But the thing that meant the most about those 2 conversations for me personally was the intentionality behind the purchasing and the spending, and almost the fact that I have more purchasing power. I have I'm able to buy different things. I'm able to spend more time because I have more time because of FI, to be a little bit more intentional with my food waste, to be a little bit more intentional with buying secondhand or fixing things or repairing things, not necessarily because I'm trying to save thousands of dollars every year, but because I'm trying to be a better consumer. Honestly, subscribing to both of those 2 things is going to save me money probably over the years, but it's personally important to me because I just want to be a better consumer overall. So
Totally. And yeah, it's hard. One thing I want to try to do, and especially now knowing of your recent guests, is like, there is a difference between waste and what I'm describing. I would never want to advocate for just like, who cares? Just, you bought the organic avocados and then you didn't even eat them and they rotted. Who cares? You're a millionaire. Like, no, that's not the message. It's just a matter of, just like you said, you mentioned the word time in there, and just like getting your time back. Exactly. Yes. Or just stressing about these decisions and kind of getting your mental clarity back by not stressing. Amazing. And if you can spend $1 or $2 extra to win back your time or reduce your mental stress and get more mental clarity, that to me seems like a good trade-off, not wasteful at all. So there's kind of the difference.
Makes sense. We've talked about how you've changed your approach to budgeting, especially with you marrying Kelly, and she kind of, moved to what was a very detailed system of when you were doing budgeting on your own to something that was a little bit more relaxed, or what you call coarse, whenever you started combining your finances with her. Is there another part of your financial life where you've loosened up on, especially something that like your younger self might have scoffed at, but now having some hindsight, you see as a much more healthier, more balanced approach?
I'm sure there are. I mean, maybe one good example would just be last year. So early 2024, we knew that we were expecting our first child in June of 2024. That was the due date. And at the same time, I went through a little career change. And so I was still at the time really focused on like building up my new career. To some extent, I had to take a step back in salary when I made the career change. So I'm focused on getting back to that high water mark and then hopefully going beyond that. And with all these different moving pieces, especially when it just came to making sure we had that, going back to cash flow, mainly it was like 80-20. 80% I was worried about the baby expenses, birthing expenses. We're on a bronze health plan, so a lot of the birthing costs had to come out of pocket. You guys know the deal. The other 20% was more about just, salary-wise. But either way, any way you cut the cake, I'm sitting there going, I don't know if I can max out my 401k this year. So there's something where I dialed it down to, for the first like 8 or 9 months of last year, all I got was my employer match. That I made sure to get the employer match, as you do, as hopefully most of us are doing. Not a single dollar more than that went into it. And only when I got on the far side of, our daughter was alive and well, and we had a few good months of raising her. And then I was like, okay, I have enough clarity in the month-to-month cash flow at this point where I'm going to start to dial back up the 401k savings. I still wasn't able to max out my 2024 contribution. And maybe if I zoom back to where I was thinking 10 years ago, the idea of not maxing out a qualified account contribution when I had the opportunity to would have been something, right?
Shame on you, man.
Correct. It would have been something that I was, what a missed opportunity. And I would have compounded that missed opportunity for 40 years and said, you just cost yourself $80,000. But current me is just like, whatever. And again, it's one of those things, it's not apathy. It's just a matter of like, I know I'm checking a lot of the boxes well.
Yeah.
And I know up to this point, through the kind of things that we talk about, I have checked a lot of those boxes well over the last 10 years. And for those 9 months in 2024, I made a very conscious decision to trade liquidity, like we talked about earlier, long-term returns, and for extra money in my 401k. And turns out I didn't need to make that trade. We would have been fine if I had never made that trade. But for that 9 months, I felt a little better. My stress was a little lower. Maybe I slept a little better because I just knew that we had some more liquid cash on hand. I think many of us will hit that point eventually where you just say to yourself, like, is it really worth feeling a little stressed out while you're lying in bed just so that you can jam more and more dollars into your portfolio? At some point, I think that trade becomes pretty one-sided.
What about on the time perspective? A lot of my friends that are now parents, they were once not parents and now they are parents. They seem to be much more particular with their time and their choices. Like, I was just catching up with a friend that I hadn't seen in quite a while, actually. And I was asking him kind of how he spends his time now. And he's like, I just love being a dad and being great at my job. There's some other hobbies, there's some other thing, going out that I just say no to. Has your kind of perspective and approach around how you spend your time changed since Mayfest came into the world?
Yeah, it has. A couple things that come into mind. First off, there's this quote from Ryan Holiday, which maybe you're familiar with. He talks about, he says, work, family, scene as in like social scene. Work, family, scene, pick two. And basically what he says is it's really hard to do all three and do all three well. You'll probably end up stressing yourself out or just failing in some way. If you try to be the consummate family person while also excelling in your career and also going out on the weekends and attending the parties, it's just a lot. There's only so much time in the day. And then, so once you have children and family becomes even more important than it's ever been before, it's pretty easy, I think, to just say, well, I want to focus on my work and I want to focus on my family, and the social scene is going to have to take a back seat for now. That's been part of my thought over the last, year and a half. And at times, this is some inside baseball, Justin, because as you know, there are times where you and Kyle have to chase after me a little bit to say, hey, Jesse, you owe us some stuff on the podcast because you guys do an amazing job as my production team. And there are times when I'm behind. And I can absolutely go back on those times and say, yeah, I'm behind because I really needed to get a bunch of work stuff done. I still wanted to be there for my family. And the last few weeks, I've just felt kind of busy and stretched on the social side. And really what it means is that I haven't fulfilled my work obligations as much as I need to or as much as I signed up to because I tried to do too much on the social side. It's funny, you kind of hear these stories of like, you know, oh, like you reach an age where you don't care anymore. You don't give a hoot if you ruffle someone's feathers. And if you say like, no, I'm not going to that wedding. Like, why would I? And I'm not there yet, but I see it. I see it. I really do.
You can understand. You can empathize with it now.
Oh my gosh, totally. Because it's like, on the one hand, of course, we'd love to fly across the country and attend this wedding of this second cousin who I haven't seen in 10 years, but they're my cousin, go explore a new place. But it's like, wait, we're going to bring the baby on this plane, right? Okay. So we're going to fly with her across the country? Okay, that seems crazy. We have to think about a car seat when we land, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it comes more logistically complicated. And then at the same time, you say, like, won't the rest of our life just be easier if we don't attend this thing? So there's definitely a big change that happens there. At least, like you alluded to in your question, I understand all the stories that I heard before I had a child. I really do get firsthand, I get where those people are coming from.
Yeah, that's good food for thought. And even, let's take the baby out of the equation for myself personally. As I've kind of gotten closer and closer to financial independence, it's cliche, but now the most precious resource of mine has been time. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm even looking at things like our client roster, and I'm like, you know what? Who's taking up a lot of time that just isn't worth the money? And I'd almost rather make half as much as I'm making now, but have twice as much time or 3 times as much time, less anxiety. It's one of those like interesting places that I'm at currently in my life where I'm routinely auditing what am I spending my time on, especially from a monetary standpoint. Like, what hours of my day am I putting into making money in some kind of capacity, and really questioning, is that worth it to me or not? Because in some sense, I've kind of won the game. Like, as long as I wait it out and the market does what it's supposed to be doing here, I will eventually reach FI. I really just have to take care of my current self. I'm over taking care of my current self right now. I think it's time to start taking some of that back. And I don't need to spend more necessarily. I'm trying to push myself to spend a little bit more on meaningful things. But I'm also just looking at the opposite side of the equation and making less. And honestly, through making less, just gaining some more time back that I can deploy to other things that I think are more meaningful to me right now.
I think we each probably have, everybody out there thinks about the way they spend their time. And that is maybe something you and I share in common, is there's a client service aspect to what we do for work. So I can totally relate to, like, there's nothing better than a fantastically wonderful client who you enjoy spending time with. You enjoy the work you do for them. They pay you what you ask them. And it's like a win-win no matter what way you look at it. And then there's some other side. There's some people, it's like, it's the opposite in every way. It's like, oh my gosh, it's kind of like pulling teeth, and I wouldn't hang out with this person if they weren't my client. They're just not paying me enough to make this worth my while. And maybe at some point in your career, Justin, or at some point in my career, it's like, you know what? I'll take what I can get. I'll just bite the bullet and continue working with this person. But right, at some point, it's like the whole FU money, famous FU money, where it's not that I really want to say FU, but it's just like, I don't necessarily have to spend my time dealing with this anymore.
Another thing that's kind of pushing me into like reclaiming a lot of my time is the fact that I've realized how much fire has dictated my decisions in my day-to-day life, like, holding on to the job or the client that we've outgrown that we were just talking about, or hesitating on spending on things that are meaningful. But it's really because I've realized, and especially through your content, how much conservatism I've built into my plan and approach. Like, for example, one thing that I've never included in my projections is Social Security. And you and I are relatively the same age, and we're both pretty young, at least 30, probably 40 years away from Social Security. How are you factoring that into your own financial plan?
And so just a little bit of background, because probably some listeners have seen headlines and heard current projections. It's like in the year 2033 or 2034, the Social Security Trust is going to run out of money. Now, the part that a lot of these articles don't say is that as of today, about 90% of the dollars that go out as Social Security benefits are simply the tax dollars that we're all paying in. So we all pay these dollars in, and then whoop, they all go out. And that remaining 10%, the opposite of the 90, that's money that comes from the trust. So eventually that 10% is going to run out. And in fact, according to the actuarial projections, by the time 2033, 2034 gets here, it won't be 90-10 anymore. It's going to be more like 80-20 or maybe even 70-30, where only, call it 75% of the outbound money will be covered by our inbound taxes. The remaining 25% would come from the trust fund. Oh, but the trust fund's now empty. So to some extent, I look at that and I say, well, the worst case, current case, is that our elder peers are only going to get 75% of what's promised to them. But that still doesn't really get to your question, Justin, which is like, what about us? What about 30 years from now when we start collecting? And my best guess, because we're just looking through too much fog to make out any shapes in the distance, right? But my best guess is that current state of Social Security, or the current way it's enacted, it's simply going to have to change. And maybe that involves changing the ages at which you can collect. It might involve simply reducing the benefits. It might involve increasing Social Security taxes. Because here's a pop quiz for you, Justin. You might know the answer, but what's the limit, or like what's the salary W-2 limit at which Social Security taxes end?
I thought it was like 180 or something. I remember it not being as high as I'd think.
Exactly. It's right around there. So for anyone listening, if you make $100,000, all of your $100,000 are subject to Social Security tax, which is about 6-ish%. But if you make $500,000, the first 180 or so is subject to Social Security taxes. The remaining 320 is not subject to any Social Security taxes. So that might change. That might be a relatively easy one for Congress to change. But the point is, there are some dials to turn. None of the dials are particularly pretty because it's like, okay, are we going to increase Social Security taxes on everybody? Are we going to increase Social Security taxes on the highest income earners? Are we going to decrease benefits? Are we going to increase the age at which you can actually apply for Social Security? Or here's an actually interesting one that I've heard that I kind of like the idea. Imagine, Justin, if we lower the Social Security age, lower than 62, maybe we drop it down to 55, but we also severely reduce the benefits that someone can collect at 55, which might reduce strain on the system because a lot of people want to apply first thing. It just means that their lifetime benefit is going to drop, which reduces stress on the system. Then we're going to end up in potentially some situation where some people are going to say, well, are you just taking advantage of people who are bad at math and apply early and now reducing their lifetime benefit? So it's not an easy problem to solve, but it's also not this like intractable problem. It's not like we have, what's that movie, Don't Look Up? It's not like we have this 100-mile radius asteroid coming at Earth that we can't do anything about. Like, this just involves taxes and dollars and money, and we have the actuarial brain power to understand that math. What we need is just the legislative gumption to do something about it. Maybe it needs some good marketing so that the U.S. populace accepts the fact that it's not going to be, like, there's no way that everybody's going to be happy. In fact, most of us are going to probably feel a little bit hard done by because either our taxes are going up or the benefits going down. But either way, I think there's a solution to this problem. We just need to get to it.
Yeah, I love the fact that there are solutions, and there's got to have to be a solution that gets implemented at some point in time because the equation's just not working. We're just coming up short, and we can keep delaying fixing or implementing a solution, but eventually we'll have to do that because I don't think Social Security can go away entirely. So many Americans are going to rely on it and rely on it currently that we're going to pay for it one way or another. Like, we're going to have to pay through either Social Security or some kind of human services that we're ultimately got to have to put tax dollars to play in. So I like the idea that it's probably not going away. It might change, and there could be even some more conservatism that we put into it. But in practicality, let's say I'm 32 right now, and I'm now realizing that I have a huge hole in my financial plan, and actually Social Security may be there. Tactically, how do I go about putting that into my financial projections? Where do I go to figure out how much I would get paid from Social Security currently? And then how do I implement that into my current plan in terms of the projection then?
Well, to answer the first part of your question is pretty nuts and bolts, which is each of us has the ability to start an account, to kind of open up your account on SSA.gov, Social Security Administration.gov, so SSA.gov. You can just open up, log into your Social Security account, and you can see what your lifetime earnings have been. they provide a little projection for you to say, oh, if you continue in this manner, then your benefit at full retirement age will be X. So that's a pretty good way to do it. And then what you can do is you can also play around. There's some really good Social Security calculators out there, especially here for the FI community, that says, well, so here's a little factoid for you listeners. You might not know this. You need 35 years worth of earnings to kind of have this like full retirement benefit, or at least like maybe a better way of saying it is that Social Security, they look at your 35 highest years of earnings when they do their math. So if you retire at 50 and you only have 28 years of earnings, it's like, well, the SSA calculator on their website doesn't know that. They're assuming you'll hit 35 years. And really, you need to take 7 of your years, in my example, and replace them with zeros. So there's some pretty good custom calculators out there that allow you to do that, to at least give you this kind of first rough draft number of what your Social Security benefit would be based on the current system. Now, if you want to, you could play around with some of those if-then ideas that I just put out a couple minutes ago. But like I said, you're really staring through a lot of fog, and you can't really make out any shapes through that much fog. So I actually wouldn't recommend doing that. Instead, what I would recommend doing, and this is maybe going back to my engineering days, I would try to bound the problem. And by that, I mean, take the Social Security number that you find currently on the website, go find a custom calculator, add some zeros in there based on your assumed retirement age, and try to get a best guess at what your Social Security benefit would be in the current regime. Maybe it's $2,500 a month. And use that number in your financial plan for now. See how your plan looks. When can you retire? How much can you spend? What's your FI number become? How many years until you reach that FI number? So that's plan A. But then if you really want to bound the problem, turn that Social Security number into a 0 and now rerun your plan. How does your FI number change? How many years until you get there? What's your retirement age? And for some of us, it's like, boy, with Social Security, I could retire at 49, but without it, I can't retire until I'm 58. Okay, that's a 9-year difference. That's a pretty big range, but at least you understand that range of potential outcomes. It might influence you to take a certain path because that range is a little bit wide. Whereas for other people, it's like, yeah, with Social Security, I could retire at 52. Without it, I retire at 54. Okay, it's a 2-year difference. Sure, all else being equal, maybe you'd rather retire 2 years earlier than 2 years later, but it's certainly not such a big difference that it would give me pause and be like, stop everything. We need to figure this out. We need to know the answer. So that would be my first instinct, is just run your financial plan twice. Once with a current Social Security benefit, once with that number being 0, just to try to get an understanding of what your range of possible outcomes is.
That's a really great plan. And you can always leave it in there, kind of penciled in, and then change it as you go. Like you do everything in your plan, honestly. Like you don't know what the stock market return is going to be this year or next year or the following year. Like a good financial plan is always somewhat written in pencil and being reviewed on an annual basis and kind of rewriting based on what just happened. And at some point in time, if Social Security gets entirely erased or needs to get reduced, then you can do that in your plan and kind of adjust. Like we're all pretty smart and nimble and flexible in the FI space. Like we can adjust if need be.
Yeah, it is. I mean, financial planning is just a dynamic practice. It has to be a dynamic practice. There's nothing static about it. And then, yeah, going back earlier, not to turn this into, I liked how, Justin, you steered this back to personal finance and personal financial planning and not to drive us back towards socioeconomics, which is not the reason we're here. There is that little concern in the back of my mind where certain sort of, like public services and like greater good, like at the end of the day, Social Security is this social safety net.
Yeah.
And yeah, to some extent, there seem to be some social safety nets that are pretty deliberately getting torn down. You can edit this part out if you want to. I didn't want to have to worry about my daughter catching measles. Now I do. But that's another one where it's like, ooh, what would the future look like without Social Security? And you kind of alluded to it a little bit, where I think there would be some interesting, not in a good way, unintended consequences of that. And either way, I think we'd pay for it in some way, shape, or form. I'll get it back to you, and you can come check me out on Jesse's Political Soapbox podcast.
I think it's healthy to talk about politics and think about that in some regard. But I do want to finish up with one final thought or one final thread. Your job kind of gives you this unique perspective. You are regularly talking to people that are approaching retirement and those who are in retirement. I'm curious, what's one assumption that pre-retirees often have that doesn't match the reality of your retiree clients?
You lobbed me a softball here, Justin. I so appreciate it. The bat is wiggling on my shoulder. I'm just waiting for that baby to cross the plate. So you and I have talked about this one before, and some of my answer is going to be there's a big part of retirement planning where pre-retirees think retirement is going to be like this, and then post-retirees actually learn, oh, retirement is like that. So there's this kind of big divide. And this goes back to some really good research from Fritz Gilbert of the Retirement Manifesto and his research partner, a guy named Eric Weigel. And one of the major outcomes, and I've seen it firsthand, one of the major outcomes is that a lot of pre-retirees, their number one concern is financial. The financial plan, it's the returns of the market. Is my FI number really what I think it is? Do I need to work one more year syndrome in order to feel even more comfortable with FI? Totally understandable things that we've all heard before. But the opposite side of the coin is that for most post-retirees, I'll call them retirees, post-retirees.
I couldn't figure that one out in the wording either.
I know. I'll just use post because then pre and post makes it really, really clear. So for most post-retirees, after they're in retirement, finances usually aren't one of the top concerns for them anymore. Not at all. Occasionally it might be. For most, it's not. So instead, what are the biggest concerns? I think that's the next question. Social connections is a big one. A lot of retirees discover that their social life, their social connections aren't nearly as strong as they hoped they would be or as they thought they would be, maybe as they assumed they would be. And part of that just comes back to, for a lot of us, our work does provide this really nice social outlet with friends at work, with colleagues, with clients, with professional contacts at other offices based on what you do. It doesn't matter. Like, the idea is that you get some sort of social joy from work, or at least a lot of us do. And you might not realize that you're going to miss that when you retire. And a similar one that has to do with work is simply purpose. Again, maybe you don't meet that social dynamic that I just described. But for a lot of people, they go to work and they say, I really like the fact that I do X, Y, and Z. I solve people's problems. I deliver a final product. I help people. They just derive some sort of real purpose from their job. And they think to themselves, yeah, I'll have purpose in retirement. I'm gonna enjoy growing my garden. That will be my purpose. And maybe for some it is. But for a lot of people, a lot of post-retirees realize that they don't get nearly as much purpose from their retirement activities as they did from their working career activities. And that's something that, again, is worth, for all these things that I'm talking about, the action to take is to really start thinking hard about this before you pull the retirement trigger. Social connections, purpose, and then the third one I think is just health. And it's always kind of sad. I mean, health declines in some cases in a really scary way. It can be remarkably quickly that someone's health declines in retirement. And talking to a client probably a month ago, because they were traveling overseas, they were doing the first big trip of their retirement. They're probably in their mid 60s. And they were kind of talking about, like, boy, this tour that we're going on for this trip, it's going to require us to be on our feet 6 hours a day for 3 days in a row. And we're feeling up for it, but we also realize that we might not get many chances to do this ever again. And boy, it sure would have been easier to do this 5 or 10 or 20 years ago. And just the idea is that, health can be really fickle. And there's just more and more research coming out, not that I'm a doctor, that if you focus on health earlier in life, it has these long-term benefits into your elder years. And so that's the last thing that I'd say is a lot of people, they think retirement is going to be go, 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 fun, golf, beach, and vacation, see the grandkids. But if you're too kind of sick or feeble to lift the grandkids off the floor and give them a hug, like that's something worth thinking about now, because there are certain things you can do to make sure that, to optimize your probabilities of living this healthy retirement, as opposed to having this great pile of money. My financial plan is great. Yeah. I just can't do anything I want to do with it. And that's something we want to avoid.
I'm recognizing that too. And as somebody that's 32, I'm like, I feel like the realities of the health scenario that you were just presenting are nowhere in sight for me. But I'm realizing that, I was talking about kind of rearranging how I'm spending my time, making a little bit less, maybe slowing down the financial success I'm having in order to make sure that I get an hour to walk or work out every single day is a trade-off well worth taking, because I know it's going to extend so much of this. And I don't think it's a surprise. You were somebody that you've had one health-related episode in the last year on your podcast, but I've heard you mention it multiple times on subsequent shows, and it's something that you're really prioritizing. Or Brad from Choose FI. has put a lot of focus on his health, or Carl Jensen from Mr. 1500, and, talking to him and him realizing the best thing he did was start to prioritize his health. Like, I don't find it surprising that that's something that we shove down in these kind of pre-fi years as we're spending so much time accumulating wealth and trying to grow our careers and focusing on the pressures of both the scene and, family. And that comes back into reality in post-fi life. And I'm glad that many of us that are 30, 40, 50 are getting in front of it early enough that we can start to prioritize it. And the social piece too is like another big one that I didn't recognize was going to be so hard. I've transitioned over the last month into a little bit more of a part-time role. And here I am last Friday afternoon wanting to go walk the trails in Austin. It's like 1:00 and I've texted a couple of people and like nobody's responding. Like I've realized all my friends like have jobs and have priorities until 4 or 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. And I'm like here wanting to make friends and have fun and on like 1:00 on a Friday. And I'm like, man, I'm going to have to put a little bit of work into like building more of a social network and finding people that match some of the lifestyle that I'm hoping to move towards and be in. And I think there's still a lot of space and work that I have to do in that arena now.
More power to you. I think that's exactly, you're having the realizations that, right, I hear from clients, that we hear when we read the forums or whatever. Going back to the focus on health, one thing about this FI community is, right, we are, to some extent, we are going against the grain. We're contrarians against society. I mean, even though to us, like some of us have been so immersed in FI, we're like, oh, are we mainstream yet? And the answer is no, we're not mainstream yet. We still are doing things in our personal finances that are so against the grain. And something, and by no means, this is not a personal attack. This is just an observation, is that unfortunately, America, to some extent the world, but America is not a healthy place. And we look around us and we see people who are not healthy, who could be focusing on a healthier lifestyle. And I think to myself, and listen, I'm by no means a paragon of health. I've been 10 to 15 pounds overweight for most of the last decade. But at the same time, I look and I say, isn't it a contrarian thing to do to say, I really do want to be healthy. Like, I really want to focus on this. I want to try to eat better, move my body more, sleep better. Oh my gosh, for so many years, I had such terrible sleep habits. And for the last year or so, I've really been trying just to develop slowly but surely better and better sleep habits. And all these things add up. And just like we know all these things in the FI world add up. So just like you're being a contrarian with your money and your time, isn't it an amazing thing to also be a contrarian in terms of how healthily you can then use this future that you're building for yourself by focusing on these health topics? So I think that's just it's like a consistency with the thought process is be a contrarian and focus on your health.
Well said. And I think that's the mic drop moment. Jesse, you got an awesome podcast out there. It is my favorite personal finance podcast on the block. I'm so excited for you to continue to grow that. If people don't know, this is your 6th appearance, but let's tell the fans again, what's your podcast and what can people expect from it?
If they've listened to the last 5 or so appearances, they might have known it as the Best Interest Podcast, which is what it was known as for the first 100 episodes. But I'm really glad that mainly so that people could find it and just understand it better. You hear the Best Interest Podcast. What's that about? Whereas if you hear the current title, Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors, it's pretty clear that I talk about a lot of the things that you and I just talked about here, Justin. I talk about financial planning and investing ideas for people who have this long-term investing view. So it's a lot of, retirement tactics. And do I do a Roth conversion here? Do I do a Social Security there? How do I think about my portfolio? I do a lot of AMA episodes that are really well received where my listeners send in real questions and I provide them answers. And listeners, you can find Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors probably where you're listening right now. I think we're on every pod player out there.
Jesse, man, it's always a blast. Thanks for coming back on the show. And I know we'll be doing a number 7 here at some point in the future.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Thank you very much, Justin. Good to see you, man.
So you just heard a whole conversation about how Jesse and I loosened up on our pursuit of financial independence and spending more on our current selves. But I also want to be very clear. This isn't easy for me. And knowing Jesse, I think he'd probably say the same. I've gotten better at spending on things that matter and easing up on always prioritizing saving and investing, but I still slip into a scarcity mindset often. I catch myself thinking I need to make more money or choose the cheaper option all the time. But if there's one thing that I've learned from others further along in their FI journey, it's that the regret isn't usually about spending too much. The regret is usually about waiting too long to let yourself enjoy the life that you've been working so hard to build. The truth is, none of us are going to be able to hit this transition perfectly. And I think that's totally okay. What matters is making small intentional shifts and allowing yourself to invest not just in your accounts, but in your life today. So with that in mind, please send me some inspiration. I love hearing from you. I'd love to hear some kind of small win that you've had against scarcity mindset lately. Anything from a purchase that you made to an experience you decided to take, or maybe even like an opportunity you said no to, although in a previous self you might have said yes to because it would make you a little bit of money. As always, you can reach me at justin@fiminded.com. That's justin@fiminded.com. If you missed last episode, go check out my conversation with Ashley Piper about consumerism and just this whole challenge around buying less new stuff. I really liked that conversation. It got me really excited to challenge myself a little bit more in this area. And then our next episode, we're diving into side hustles, which you know is one of my favorite topics. So you're not going to want to miss that. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on it. That's it for today, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.